Hello, 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 beautiful unicorns. Welcome back to Get Your Shit Together with Yana Kasperczak, which is who I am. And today you are tuning into another episode of our very special series, Your Journey of Becoming, where women will be sharing with you how one way or another they went from dreaming to doing. And this is where real women share their real stories, the messy, the magical, the middle part of becoming who they are, who they were meant to become. Because the truth is, your dream life does not start when everything is perfect. And I'm sure everybody already knows that. Otherwise, we would all have our dream life, right? It starts when everything is messy and the moment, and it starts the moment that you say, I am done playing small. When you've had enough. And if you are ready to say that today, grab your coffee, light your candle, and let's dive in. Because today I'm joined by Leticia Francis, a woman who refused to live one more day in survival mode and chose to reclaim her life with truth, ease, and unapologetic power. Leticia carries the fierce yet grounded energy that wakes you up from inside out. Known as the Survival Mode Disruptor, she helps high achieving women um, break those patterns that once kept them safe, but now keep them small. Her no fluff approach, lived experience, and deep wisdom ignite identity shifts. You know, when your identity completely shifts and the healing and the transformation that sticks around. It doesn't just come and go. You're going to absolutely love her story. And I love to start off with a question for you, Leticia. What was that moment you realized the life you were living wasn't actually yours?
The day I got arrested on my corporate job,
Ooh, that's a
I,
great way to start. Let's do this. Right?
yeah, um, yeah, 2012, I was called by the receptionist on my job and told that the police were there to see me. And so I asked her to tell them to meet me in reception downstairs, and I went downstairs and I knew why they were there. I had become involved with this guy who relapsed after a death in his family, and he relapsed on crack cocaine. And he had been stealing from his job. He was working in a high-end restaurant and was stealing meat to fund his drug addiction. And one day he asked me to go to his job and pick up a bag. I had no idea that was what was happening. I used to go to his job all the time and I thought nothing of it. I went to pick up the bag. I was surrounded by security. Um, and they told me that they had been watching him for a while. He had stolen so much meat that they
Yeah.
had put cameras in the walk-in freezers and fridges. And the only issue that they had was they knew he was stealing it. They didn't know how he was getting it out of the building. And that particular day was the day he asked me to take it. So weeks later, I had gotten a call on my job. I used to work in commercial insurance. It was during renewal time, so very busy. I had been at work since 6 a.m. and the police called and asking for an interview. And I told them, well, I cannot come right now. I'm at work. I'm in the middle of renewals and you'll have to speak to me afterwards. And within 15 minutes, my phone was ringing again, and it was reception telling me the police were there. So I get into the reception area. They place me under arrest, and I go to jail. And I get my one phone call. I call my mom. And I was like, listen, I need you to get me a lawyer because like I can't believe I got swept up in this man's bullshit. Like
Mhm.
I was angry. So I went back to my cell and I waited. So I remember the police coming and taking me out of my cell one more time. And they said I had a visitor. So I assumed it was the lawyer.
Mm.
It wasn't. It was my mom. And I sat in front of her and she basically just said, why do you love everyone else more than you love yourself?
Ooh, that's
And
a good one.
it was like a
Mama
Mike
knows.
Tyson body blow. Like
She's
she
been thinking
winded
that,
me. Yeah,
right?
she winded me. And I had to go back into my cell after that visit and sit and think
Okay.
about it. You know, I had been through a lot from a very young age. I had been groomed from the age of 14 by a man that was more than twice my age. That a relationship was highly abusive, but I was very unhappy in my home. My mom had married a man who did not care for me, that treated me very poorly. My father had married a woman that did not care for me and didn't want me around. So I had no place in my home, which was why this man was able to groom me, and take me under his wing. I endured 8 years of abuse in that relationship, and it ended as a result of me being stabbed in my early 20s. I thought that life would magically fall into place. And I was very naive in my understanding of the residual impact of trauma. I had been traumatized for a long time, and I was coming into adulthood for the first time having to live by myself, first time having to pay bills. I was completely alone. I didn't have support of my family because I had been isolated as a result of this abusive relationship. So I had to rebuild my life by myself. Um, and I really just thought everything would be okay, but it wasn't. I ended up in two more abusive relationships, and I didn't recognize that they were abusive because I was no longer being hit. But there was
Mhm.
emotional abuse, there was financial abuse, that I endured, and I almost felt like I deserved it. And there was no different in this relationship. This was actually my second relationship with an addict where I was drained of my money because I was manipulated. I didn't understand the nature of addiction. Um, but this one resulted in me being arrested. So as I sat in my cell, I had to recognize that while I was not my actions were not a direct result of me being in jail. Like I had done nothing wrong other than go pick up a bag that I was very oblivious to what was really happening. However, my decisions were the reason I was in jail that day. My decisions were the reason why I had ended up in multiple abusive relationships. My decisions were the reason why I had been self-abandoning for years. And I had to make a decision that something needed to change. So I was eventually released, from jail. I was not charged with anything. And I sought help. I found a
Okay.
coach who was incredibly straightforward. She didn't mince words. She
Dun, dun, dun,
didn't
dun.
sugarcoat anything.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down the first session with her and just explaining what I had been through. And she said, "You sound to me like you're a victim." And I looked at her, confused.
How dare you call me out, right?
Because I was a victim.
Right?
You
But
know what
when
I
we're
mean?
called out,
Like,
we're like
yeah,
the ego is like, oh. We've been
But I was
caught.
confused as to why she had said it in such a negative way, because that
Mhm.
was my reality. I had been through a lot of stuff at that point for
Yes.
nearly 20 years.
You were conditioned to
Yes.
call those things and to like kind of like have that kind of a life until you woke up.
Yeah. And
And
her her statement that day, of course, I'm like, what you mean by that? Because I'm a very straight shooter too. So I'm like, keep it real. Like, what are you saying? And she basically explained to me that as long as I was a victim, I did not have control. As long as I was a victim, I was giving
Yeah.
away my power. As long as I was a victim, life would only ever happen to me. And
Yeah.
that woke me up.
Hmm.
That made me see that I had a lot more control over my life than I actually recognized. That helped me on a journey to self-acceptance, self-love, peace, and the ability to define who I was unapologetically. And that created this drive in me to continue on the path. I ended up leaving the country. I'm originally from Bermuda. I left Bermuda. I moved to England. I pursued my corporate insurance, my corporate commercial insurance um job. I reached the pinnacle of my career, and then I decided that I was not doing what I was born to do. I was doing what I was expected to do based on societal expectations and family expectations, and it really wasn't who I was. And I had two kids back to back. I was out of work. Um, in a 3-year period, I was out of work for 2 years because I was on maternity leave. And in that time, I really spent time trying to figure out who I was and what I really wanted out of life. And I recognized like my story was powerful. My story
Mm.
was the reason why I was the woman that I was today. And I decided that I was going to make an impact. And I was going to make an impact on women like me who had been through a lot of shit, that had
Hmm.
settled into expectations that weren't their own and was living a life feeling stuck, and who wanted to start thriving. And that has been my mission for the last 6 years, helping women really focus on getting out of what I call survival mode
Yeah.
and really start thriving in life.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. There's so much in there of what you have experienced throughout your life. And one of the things that I recognize within myself, and this is what I also recognize that this is one of the things that I help women work through as well. And many of us do that, like help women work through these parts, but we call it something a little different. We can call it the good girl syndrome, right? When we are literally putting other people first. And this is the reason why your mom asked you that question, because she sees you as you're such a good girl. But what about you? Because as a good girl, that is a big part of what it is involved of being a good girl, where you're putting other people first and you're taking care of them and you're caretaking for everyone, making sure that everybody's happy and satisfied and not usually asking for help yourself because you come from a place of, I got it, I can do it all. And then until one day it just feels too much. All of a sudden, it's like the walls come crushing in and it feels like it's the end. And yet, one of my favorite quotes is that what a caterpillar thinks is the end, the butterfly knows is the beginning.
Mhm.
So sometimes we also know on one level that this is the end of this version of us. And now this is the beginning of this new and improved version of us. Um, So I'd love to hear what was that version of you that had to die so that the woman you are now could finally be born or reborn.
I had a lot of survival identities, as I call them. I was a people pleaser, I was a
Mm,
fixer, I was a martyr, I
yeah,
was
yeah.
an overachiever. All of those things were trauma responses to the things that I had been through. Most of them I could track back to my relationship with my father, who I suspect is a narcissist. Um, so a lot of the way that I showed up as a result of what I went through, although,
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
lot of what I spoke to started at 14 here, but I think my survival mode really started when I was in 7 or 8, around that age. So for many, many years, I assume these survival identities to keep everybody around me happy, to keep myself from getting in trouble, to uh, just fit in and to be somewhat accepted for the muted version of myself that I presented.
Mhm.
Um, so those identities, putting everyone first, overperforming in order to be accepted, fixing everyone else's problems but avoiding my own, all of those things had to die in order for
Yeah.
me to step into the woman that I am today. I had to learn how to set boundaries. I had to learn how to prioritize myself. I had to learn that done was better than perfect. And I
Mhm.
also had to redefine success based on what it meant to me rather than what it meant to everyone else. And in doing so, I learned how to step into who I was authentically and live from that space instead of the mask that I had assumed for a very long time. But it all started with truly taking full responsibility of my own life, changing my narrative, shifting the conditioning that I had um, grew up with, redefining the stories that I told about myself, so that I could step into the woman who I wanted to become rather than what I had always known to be.
I love that. There's so much beauty in that because what you're talking about and describing is you rebuilt yourself. You
Mhm,
reprogrammed yourself because in order for you to be who you are today, there's many of those parts that many women who are listening and even men can relate to as well, listening to these essentially almost like parts of ourselves that made us who we are, our kind of like our parts of our personality and traits that might be attached to this way of showing up, where you're very accommodating. And now you're like, I ain't doing that. No, thank you. Or you are such a people pleaser where you'll go to, you'll say yes to everything. Like
mhm,
if it's a party, if it's any invitation that anybody invites you to, you always say yes. And then some, yes, you love, and others, you not so much so. It's kind of like you become the yes woman, right?
mhm,
That's a great movie to watch, by the way, Yes Man. Beautiful concept, but at the same time it teaches you because a lot of people that are closed, they need to say yes to a lot more things. And then a lot of people who have said yes to a lot of things, they need to go to the other event that says no, say no. And no is a complete sentence.
mhm.
So it sounds like you have rewritten all of those parts and buried them nicely in the backyard with each one of them labeled, this is where you are buried, this is where you are, and I don't need to visit because I know where you are, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
Conscious
be-
decision to heal and move forward, you know?
exactly. And everything does start with conscious choice. That's why I know at the core of all of our work that we do, all the women that come on this podcast, and including you, Leticia, of course, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be on here. Is that at the core, what we're really doing is we're trying to help people that we are working with to raise their consciousness.
Hmm.
And by raising every person's consciousness, help them to raise their own consciousness because we can't raise anyone. We can't do anything for anyone, right? So we're helping to raise the consciousness of the world one person at a time. And it's simply becoming aware of what is in front of us.
Hmm.
One of the things that you were talking about, you realize that everything that was happening, essentially that it wasn't your fault, but it was based on the decisions that you were making, right?
Hmm.
So taking that responsibility for the decisions that you've made, and then from that point on, like the sky's the limit, right? You grow so exponentially that you don't even recognize that version of you, and then you outgrow this version that you are, and in the next version, and we continue to do that, right? So the other question that I like to ask is, what was the lie you were living that you didn't realize was actually a lie until everything fell apart?
So I don't know if this truly answers the question, but I'll give it a go. Um,
Awesome.
One of the things that I had heard from a very young age was that I was too much. Every
Mm,
adult that encountered me had an issue with the way that I presented myself. And as a result, that was part of the reason why I was groomed so well, why I was um,
yeah.
readily able to accept the emotional abuse that I endured. And I myself used to describe myself as a self-contained hurricane because I had spent many, many years packing myself away. What I didn't realize was, although many people described me as too much, I was just too much for them. And a huge part of the fulfillment and success and the impact that I have had since making a conscious decision to take radical ownership of my life and stepping into myself authentically is that I am a catastrophe 5 hurricane. And I am that way because I am meant to be I am here to change the world. And no one benefits from me silencing myself. No one benefits from me presenting half a version of myself. The people who benefit the most are the people who are able to get a peak of the Cat 5 strength that is me. So the lie was that I was too much. The
Mm.
truth is I am just enough to make the impact that I was born to make.
I love that. And that was a beautiful answer. Honestly, there's no right or wrong answers because whatever comes to your mind, whatever comes through is exactly the thing that whoever is listening to this can relate to, right? Because a lot of these experiences we go through, we sometimes temporarily, or sometimes for, that temporarily might be longer, we forget that we're not the only ones, right? And sometimes when we forget that we're not the only ones, we don't see the full picture. We're stuck looking through a peephole. And all of us have that experience where we were stuck looking through a peephole at something that we ourselves have went through and might not see the people that are around us as well, right? For me, it was when we lost our twins at 5 months of pregnancy. We lost our twin girls, and it was the whole ordeal. The ambulance came to the house. I was already in labor, brought me to the hospital. In Canada, we don't, all these things are not that expensive because they already take it all in taxes. And let me tell you, the tax is pretty nicely here. So even though you think it's cheaper, it's not. It still costs you. But anyways, and then after we have lost them for 15 years, now we do have two kids, right? After we lost the twins, got pregnant with our daughter, and then our son came shortly-ish after, so 3.5 years. But for 15 years, most of those 15 years, I was pretending everything was good, and I was kind of like putting on a show, the good girl, saying the things you're supposed to say, everything is good, I got him. Meantime, on the inside, or meanwhile, in the inside, you're like screaming and you're suffocating because
Hmm.
nobody really sees you. Because, well, how can they? Because what you say is who you're, what you're going through. And so for these 15 years, it took me, as I said, 15 years. I finally was ready to look at the pictures that were taken when we lost the twins at the hospital, because this is one of the things they did. And they put them on CDs. And because this was on CD, like I didn't have any devices at this point when I was ready to look at them, like just 15 years, right? But in 15 years now, laptops are not made with anything they can put a CD in, right? So I'm like, I'm ready to look at them, but now it's not so easy anymore because how am I gonna do that?
Hmm.
Right? Right? So I found a pretty simple way on Amazon, little device you attach, blah blah blah. And I looked at the pictures, and for the first time, I didn't see myself. I saw my husband, right? And all of a sudden, I just saw the other side, that all this time I was stuck in my own place, in my own bubble. And sometimes we need to kind of step out and see that bubble for what it is. I'm curious what that bubble was in your life where you're kind of like you saw things in a different way that you didn't see before, and all of a sudden things just made sense and everything started to fall into place as you always desired.
Hmm. Um, I decided to write about my experience. Still yet to publish the book, but I decided that I wanted to write about it,
Mm.
um, and really revisit it in a space that I can truly let go. And in that process of writing, and now I'm trauma informed, I'm certified as a coach. Now I've done a lot of extra work on myself. I'm looking at myself from a different perspective.
Mm.
And a lot of things that I had chalked up to being personality, I actually realized were trauma responses. And I think it made a lot of sense. My actions, a lot of the things that I did, I questioned for a very long time. But now having this awareness of how trauma truly shows up in my life, how it shows up in our actions, how it is very difficult for us to let go of those things until we have the awareness of that and are able to reprogram and then reinvent ourselves in another way that's not aligned with the trauma that we've experienced. Looking back, the areas in which I had been very angry with myself for the decisions that I made, I had a lot more compassion and grace for myself. Um, because there was a reconciliation that I had never seen before, that I did the very best that I could with the information that I had at the time. And oftentimes, when I had looked back, I was looking from a place where I had more information. So I always judged myself. So being able to see things from a different perspective and be a lot more compassionate with myself also helped me move forward with less resentment of the journey, but more appreciation of the result of the journey.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And now that you're like, how would you describe where you are today versus where you were, let's say, 5 years ago?
I am a full version of myself, in complete control of where I'm heading, aligned with my goals and my core values, um, and in a place where I am giving back because I know how hard it is to get to where I am.
Yeah. It definitely is. It is hard to get there. And
Hmm.
it's also hard to climb Mount Everest, and that's why it's not for everyone.
Hmm.
And not everybody is ready to do that work, but those that are ready to do the work, there's no going back once they start. Like we know that's how it started. They're like we're both like, okay, let's go, let's try to do this work. Initially it starts with let's try, let's see what happens. And then I began to see the results. I imagine same thing for you. And
Hmm.
then afterwards you're like, oh, this is great, not so bad. Let's keep going. Let's keep doing this. And we become almost obsessed with becoming a better version of ourselves. And then we chase that, okay, well, now that I got to this version of me, what's the next version of me? What's the next version? And each version is just a better and better version that we ourselves get to re-identify throughout this journey of becoming.
Hmm.
So when would you say the journey of becoming begins and ends for a person?
It begins the day they're born and it ends the day they die. Um, I think every day is an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. Every day is an opportunity
Yeah.
to do differently, to heal, to move beyond our trauma, to move beyond the things and circumstances that we have experienced in life. So every day is an opportunity to become. And it starts again with a decision. Uh, Life isn't linear, although we would like to believe it is. And we experience ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys. And the thing that we must hold on to is everything teaches us a lesson. Everything that we experience is an opportunity to edify ourselves. So whether you are 7 or whether you are 57, every single day is a day that you can learn something new about yourself, um, that will help you get closer to the woman or the person that you want to become.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Now, as we're wrapping up, I like to ask one last question from you, and then I'll ask a last question from the audience because I like to wrap things up, and you'll see what I
Hmm.
mean to bring everybody in as well. So, for you, Leticia, what's something you are proud of today that the old you would have never believed was actually possible?
I'm proud of my story. I lived many, many years in shame and guilt, hiding my truth from people. And I am so proud of every step that I have taken to get me here today. And yes, it looks very ugly to those who don't understand, but I now recognize that everything that I went through was needed. Everything that I experienced shaped me, and I am proud as hell of that.
I love that. And that would be a perfect reminder for everybody to love their story, which really means love your life, love everything that you've been through. And I know some things would take time to get to that place, but that is the journey and the path of healing that you'll get to a place where, yeah, some crazy and unspeakable things have happened to you, but they made you who you are in many different ways. And then you can take who they made you today and do whatever you want with it. Like it literally, you can take all these ingredients that you've been given. You can choose which ones to keep, which ones might be rotten and get rid of them and do something with it. So I want to ask everybody to share your biggest takeaway after everything that we talked about, after everything that Leticia shared with you, her journey of becoming. her experiences and how she now sees that as something that not only is a big part of her, but something that she is grateful for having gone through, having experienced, because it made her who she is, and it will continue to make you, Leticia, who you are, that next elevated version of you. So share your biggest takeaway with me. What are you walking away with? What is your biggest aha moment? What is your biggest realization? And then, as always, what action are you going to take with the takeaway? Because these aha moments, these realizations that we have, they're great. They're amazing. And we love when they come, right? Don't we? But if you want them to continue to come to you, and maybe even much more faster, then you got to take action on whatever it is that's coming your way. Because the action you're going to be taking is actually going to be inspired action. When you feel inspired, it's like you listen to Leticia's story, her journey, and you're like, yes, let's do this. I can do this. If anyone can, I can, right? Um, and you go after that. So, takeaway, action. You got to do the both. So thank you very much, Leticia, for sharing your story and your light today. I know many women will relate to your words and feel seen and heard in your words. And those of you who are listening, if you love this episode, share this with a friend who's ready to get their shit together, her shit together, and come hang out with us on the podcast and Get Your Shit Together podcast, where conversations like this turn into lifelong sisterhood if you let it. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Get Your Shit Together podcast, and not miss an episode because there's more where that comes from. So until next time, keep showing up, becoming, and remember you are not behind. It is not too late. You are right on time. Thank you very much, Leticia. Maybe we'll see you next
Thank you.
time. Thanks.